from a very big disappointment that I had. I was a quilt teacher, and I was getting started. I was entering a lot of competitions, and one of my quilts came back, a quilt that I felt was a masterpiece to me, came back that it was just trashed by judges. And at the time, I was very used to entering competitions. I was a veteran, but this was so inane, the judgment statements that they made, that I thought, they just don't get it. The name of the quilt was Creation of the Sun and Stars, and it was a very spiritual thing. And I thought, there's just no place for these types of quilts out there. And I had just finished teaching at a retreat held by two special friends of mine who had written a book called With Sacred Threads. And that book, it explored the spirituality that quilt makers put into their work. And it was the sacred that, went into every stitch. The emotions and spiritual aspects that most people didn't look at. They were looking at workmanship. They were looking at the art, but they weren't looking at the emotional impact that their work had. And so I just finished teaching for them. And when I got home, I was exhausted. It was a four-day workshop, and all I wanted to do was lay down. Well, when I got my quilt back, when I walked in the door, my quilt was back from the show. I opened it up to make sure my baby was okay, because your quilts are your babies that you send out. And I saw the judge's statement, and it had ripped it apart for reasons that were just totally, they were really not valid. And usually these are subjective opinions, and I take it with a grain of salt most of the time. Whether you win or you do not place is again subjective, and it depends on the judge. And so normally I would pitch that in the trash, but this was so inane. And it just kept going through my mind, they don't get it, they don't get it. And I thought, you know what, I'm just going to put it out of my mind, I'm going to forget about it, and I'm going to lay down and take my nap. And as I laid down, it was like a pinwheel in my mind that wouldn't stop. And I thought, did it have anything to do with the spirituality? Because maybe the judges didn't like that I had mentioned the word God in the statement. And I thought, well, they just didn't get it. There's no safe place. And the next thing in my mind was, well, you have to start something. And I thought, what? And it says it should be called Sacred Threads. It should be every 2 years. These are the ladies who are going to help you. And they were the ladies who I had taught at the show I just came back from.
Wow.
And it really freaked me out. This is weird, and it's eerie. And, I didn't want any part of it. And I thought, I don't have money to do this. I don't have the expertise. I'd never put on a show, even worked in a show. And I didn't want to do it, but it wouldn't stop. And so I thought to myself, you know what? I'm going to call these women. As soon as they tell me no, I'm going to go back and take my nap and forget about it. Well, they didn't say no. Every one of them said yes. I thought, this isn't the way this is supposed to play out. One lady said no, and then she called me back 40 minutes later, and she said, I don't know what it is, I can't say no. I said, tell me about it. And she later became my co-chair of the show. And her name is Wendy Benner. So that's how it all started. And so what we did was look at the emotional impact. The statements were every bit as important as the quilt itself, because we were trying to reach people's emotions. There are shows that dealt with art, like I said, shows that dealt with workmanship, but no one dealt at the anxiety, the love, the joy, the fears that we all put into this work, because as these artists quilt making, we spend months and even years putting everything we have into this work. So that's how it started. It was in Ohio. We had 5 shows in Ohio. The first one was July of 2001, and then every 2 years after that, we had a show.
Now, what was the inspiration of making this particular quilt, Imagine You Can?
She didn't. No, hers is around the corner.
It's the tree.
Oh, the tree.
When you first come in, it's what you see.
Okay, so we need to, but what was the...
for telling your story.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, it's.
Thanks for the heart.
I was an instrument.
Yes.
The show needs to be.
How
And
many
I'm
was-
thrilled to
how
see
many
it here.
How many participants was in the first show in 2001? Do you remember?
I remember we had 147 quilts, and we took every quilt we got because no one knew who we were. We were brand new, and it was still a very powerful show.
So about
Yeah.
how many participants do you have now?
I know that they received the most entries they've ever received, and I'm just so thrilled. You know, this is like passing on my baby, watching my baby grow and now leave.
There's 170 some here, I think, now.
74.
You know how many?
174.
74.
174.
Yeah.
Yeah, 170.
So they've had to reject some.
They
Yeah,
said
they
they
had
turned
to-
away hundreds,
Yeah, and that
so it got a lot of.
it breaks my
interest.
heart because every single quilt is a valid expression.
Oh, yeah.
And every single quilt has a place. And we always tried to incorporate as many artists as we could because every artist has a point of view. Every artist needs to be heard because they have a valid, spiritual outlook. And so it's difficult. It's difficult. One of the worst things I ever had to do was jury a show because I want everybody to be in. But unfortunately, it's always hard to find that kind of a space to put everybody in. But I'm thrilled that it's here. I'm thrilled that it's in this sacred space, and I'm thrilled to see the way it's laid out like a maze. And I'm extremely